My name is Rachel Doyle. I'm 32 years old, and on Christmas night, my parents locked me out of their house in the snow and wouldn't let me back in for so much as a coat. I stood on that porch with just my purse on my shoulder, and through the gap in the door, my mother said the thing she'd been saying my whole life. "You can't do anything on your own, Rachel. You're desperate." Behind her, my brother Cody pulled the curtains, shut in what used to be my room. The next morning, I drove to the bank to use an old card my grandfather had left me years ago, hoping for gas money and a cheap motel. The manager swiped it, looked at her screen, and went white. "Ma'am," she whispered, "please sit down. You need to see this." 48 hours later, my mother wasn't the one giving orders anymore. Welcome back to Com Drama Stories. If you've ever been called desperate by the very people who were quietly leaning on you the hardest, stay right here, because what that bank manager found on her screen is going to change everything you thought you knew about this family. Subscribe and drop a comment. You're going to want to be here for this. Let me clear something up first, because my mother spent years telling a different version. I was not living in my parents' house because I'd failed at life. 3 months before that Christmas, I'd taken a job as an ER nurse at the hospital in my hometown. I moved back from the city for it. My apartment wouldn't be available until February, and my first paychecks were still clearing. So I asked if I could stay in my old room for 8 weeks to save on a deposit. That's the whole shameful story of my dependence. A grown woman with a full-time job in the hardest department in the building, being smart with money. I'm the kind of person who plans, who handles the crisis without making it about herself. I don't ask people for things. I figure it out. That sounds like strength. Most days it is. But I've learned it's also the thing that made me an easy target. Because if you never ask for help, the people around you decide you don't need any. And some of them decide that while quietly helping themselves to what's yours. I didn't know that last part yet. It was sitting on a screen at a bank, and it had been there for years. The temperature in that house had a pattern, and the pattern was Cody. My brother is 4 years younger than me, and from the day he was born, he was the one the whole family arranged itself around. There was always a reason: premature baby, hard time in school, lost a job, then another, then a third. Every setback became more evidence that Cody needed protecting, while I, who handled my own setbacks without an audience, became evidence of something else entirely. I became proof that some children just don't need their parents. My mother said it like a compliment and meant it like a dismissal. "Oh, Rachel's fine. Rachel can take care of herself," she'd say, waving me off while she cleared every obstacle in Cody's path. Back home those first weeks, I watched it up close for the first time as an adult. Cody, 28, unemployed again, getting his car payment handled. Cody getting a check pressed into his hand at the dinner table. And me, the working nurse, getting reminded how lucky I was they were letting me stay. One night I offered money for groceries since I was eating their food. My mother patted my hand and said, "Don't worry about it. You can barely take care of yourself. You can't do anything on your own anyway." I let it go. I always let things go. And it turns out that's exactly the quality a thief looks for in a victim. The card in my purse came from my grandfather, my mother's father, Leo Marsh. Pop Leo. He died 6 years ago, but he gave me that card 14 years before that, on the day I graduated high school. He took me out for pie, just the two of us, slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a debit card with my name on it, attached to an account he'd opened for me, with a real amount already in it. He told me it was for my future. For school, for emergencies, for the day I'd need to stand on my own 2 feet. Then he did something I didn't understand at 18. He took a paper napkin, wrote on it, folded it into a little square, and tucked it behind the card in my wallet. "Keep this with the card," he said. "Don't read it now. Read it the day you need it." Then he looked at me dead serious and added one thing out loud. "And Rachel, don't tell your mother about this account. She'll spend it." I laughed because I was 18 and I thought he was just being a grumpy old man about his own daughter. I tucked the napkin away and mostly forgot about it. I used the account a little in college, then less, then not at all once I had a nurse's salary. Years went by. The card went soft and scratched in the bottom of my wallet. Just an old thing I never threw away. I had no idea I was carrying a loaded weapon and a warning, folded into a square, the whole time. Pop Leo died 6 years ago and my mother handled everything. She was his power of attorney near the end, managing his accounts, his bills, his estate. I was 26, grieving, living in the city, and grateful someone was handling it. At the funeral, I asked gently whether Pop had left anything, any little keepsake or note, because he was the one person who really saw me. My mother looked me right in the eye and said, "Oh, honey, your grandfather didn't have much at the end. There wasn't really anything to leave. Don't go getting your hopes up about an inheritance." I believed her. Of course I believed her. She was my mother standing at her own father's funeral. The idea that she would lie to me there never entered my head. So I let go of any thought of a gift from Pop Leo. I had my memories and a scratched-up old debit card I assumed had long since been closed or emptied. That single sentence, "There wasn't really anything to leave," was the cornerstone of everything that came after. It was the lie that kept me from looking. And it worked for 6 years. Because the most effective lies aren't the ones that scare you off. They're the ones that gently tell you there's nothing worth looking at. She counted on it, and I stopped looking. Living back in that house 3 months before Christmas, I started noticing money I couldn't explain. Cody didn't work, not steadily, but Cody had things. A newer truck in the driveway, old debts that seemed to evaporate, a vacation, a deposit on an apartment for him and his fiancée, a watch. I'm not nosy by nature, but I'm an ER nurse, and the job trains you to notice when the story doesn't match the chart. The story was that my parents were careful retirees on a fixed income. The chart was a 28-year-old with no job buying a truck. One evening I asked lightly, just curious, where Cody was getting the money for all this. My mother's face did something I'd see again later. A quick flicker before the smooth mask came back. "That's family business, Rachel. It's being handled." I let it go, because that's what I do, but it lodged somewhere in the back of my mind. I even thought once, idly, that I should look at my old account from Pop Leo someday, just to close it properly. But I had no access to my parents' finances, nothing to investigate. The wrongness was just a feeling, and feelings aren't evidence. So I filed it away with everything else I'd let go. She needed me out of that house. Not because Cody needed a room, because I was getting too close. A daughter who never visits can't notice anything. A daughter sleeping down the hall might. Christmas gave her the excuse. Christmas dinner was a performance, and I was cast as a cautionary tale. My mother spent the meal narrating Cody's bright future, the engagement, the apartment, the fresh start. When the conversation drifted to me, it drifted down. "Rachel's still finding herself," she told the table, "though I had a job, a plan, and a pension. We're letting her stay while she sorts things out." I sat there in my good sweater and said nothing. Making a scene at Christmas would only prove her point. After dessert, my father disappeared into the den, which is what he does when something hard is about to happen, and my mother followed me into the kitchen. "We think it's best if you go tonight," she said. Just like that. Tonight. Christmas night. I asked if I could at least stay until morning, pack properly. "Cody and Belle are coming in the morning," she said. "And honestly, Rachel, the longer you drag this out, the harder you make it. You can't keep leaning on us. You need to learn to do things on your own." She stopped me from getting my bags, said she'd send my things along later, that I was making it a production. So I left with my purse and my coat in my hand and nothing else. My mother stood in the doorway with the warm light behind her and said it. The whole sentence, the one I'll hear in my head forever. "You can't do anything on your own, Rachel. You're desperate." Then she shut the door and I heard the lock turn. I sat in my car in their driveway, engine running for the heat, snow filling the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. My hands were shaking and not from the cold, but I'm an ER nurse, and the job has taught me one genuinely useful thing. When everything goes wrong at once, you don't get to fall apart. You triage. I had maybe $60 cash, a quarter tank of gas, and a credit card near its limit. I went through my wallet under the dome light looking for anything, and my fingers found the old card. Pop Leo's card. Soft-edged, numbers half worn off, and tucked behind it, a little folded square of paper I hadn't looked at in 14 years. I didn't open the napkin that night. I was too tired, too cold, too close to crying. But I held that card and thought, maybe there's $20 left on it. Maybe enough for a motel. My mother had said Pop left nothing. I wasn't expecting a miracle. I was expecting bus fare. I found a cheap motel off the highway, paid cash for one night, and lay awake deciding that first thing in the morning, I'd take that old card to the bank and see if my dead grandfather could buy me one more night indoors. That decision changed my entire life. The bank was a small credit union on Main Street. I got there when it opened, running on no sleep and motel coffee. I slid the old card across the counter with an embarrassed little laugh. "This is really old," I said. "It might be closed. I just want to check the balance." The teller swiped it, frowned, swiped it again. Then she said, "Let me get my manager," in a voice that made my stomach drop, because I know that voice. It's the voice nurses use in the hallway when they don't want to say the bad thing in front of the patient. The manager came over, a calm woman named Joan, and she sat at her desk, pulled up the account, and I watched her face change. She read something, scrolled, read more. The color went out of her cheeks. She glanced at me, then back at the screen. Then she lowered her voice the way you do when you're about to hand someone news that's going to hurt. "Ma'am, please sit down. You need to see this." My heart was doing the thing it does in a trauma bay. That slow, heavy pounding. I braced for empty. I thought, here it comes. The account's been drained. My mother was right. This is the final humiliation of the worst week of my life. What Joan turned the monitor to show me was not empty. It was full of activity. Years of it. And not one transaction in that long, scrolling list had been made by me. Here is what was on the screen. The account my grandfather opened for me, the one my mother swore didn't exist, was still open, still in my name, and it had been used as a piggy bank for years. Dozens of withdrawals and transfers, going back before Pop Leo died and continuing long after. Regular amounts, sometimes large ones, and every transfer had a destination, an account belonging to Sharon Doyle. My mother. My grandfather had put far more into that account than I ever knew, building something for me over the years, and my mother had been quietly bleeding it out the whole time. The balance remaining was a fraction of what the deposits and interest should have grown to. I sat in that chair and did what the job trained me to do. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I asked questions. "These withdrawals," I said to Joan, keeping my voice level. "I didn't make any of these. Who authorized them?" Joan pulled up more detail. For years, the access had been tied to a power of attorney, a legal authorization for my grandfather's affairs. But she said slowly, "Miss Doyle, this account is in your name. You're the sole owner. And these transactions, especially the ones after the date you're telling me your grandfather passed away," she stopped. She didn't have to finish. The woman who called me desperate, who said I couldn't take care of myself, who told me I needed to learn to stand on my own, had been standing partly on my money for years. And here's what matters legally, and you need to stay with me here because this is where everything turns. A power of attorney ends the moment the person dies. The instant Pop Leo passed, any authority my mother held through that document was gone. Automatically. In every state. No exceptions. Every withdrawal she made after his death wasn't a gray area or a family loan. It was unauthorized. And the account she was pulling from wasn't even his. It was mine. So she'd taken money that belonged to me, using an authority that died with her father for years, while telling me I couldn't take care of myself. The audacity of it steadied me. There's a clarity that comes when cruelty turns out to be that clean, that documented, that provable. Joan walked me through every detail like the professional she was. She told me the credit union could print my full statement history, that I'd want to identify every unauthorized transaction, and that given the pattern and the dates, I should file a fraud claim and speak with an attorney. "Some of these transactions may be recoverable," she said. Recoverable. I held on to that word. I asked her to print everything, every page, going back as far as the system held. While the printer ran, I let the ER nurse and me take over from the daughter. The daughter wanted to drive to that house and put my fist through the locked door. The nurse made a list. Get the statements. Identify the fraud. Find a lawyer. Document everything. Stay calm, because the calm person in the crisis is the one who controls it. By the time Joan handed me a thick stack of warm paper, I wasn't a desperate woman who'd been thrown out in the snow anymore. I was a creditor building a case. Sitting in that motel room with the statements spread across the bed, I finally understood the whole machine my mother had built. It started with the lie at the funeral. There wasn't really anything to leave. That sentence wasn't grief. It was a lock on a door. As long as I believed Pop left nothing, I'd never check the account. And as long as I never checked, she could keep drawing from it. I stacked the statements neatly. I circled every transaction after the date of my grandfather's death. And then I reached for my wallet because there was one piece of evidence I still hadn't read. I took the little folded napkin out from behind the old card, the one Pop Leo had tucked there 14 years ago and told me to read only on the day I needed it. The paper had gone soft and yellow, the folds nearly worn through. But his handwriting was still there. That careful, slanted print I'd know anywhere. I want you to hold these words in your mind for the rest of the story, because my grandfather wrote them when I was 18 years old. And he knew exactly what was coming. For when you have to stand on your own. This is yours, Rachel. Nobody else's. Don't tell your mother about it, because she'll spend it, and she'll have a good reason every time. Some people love you and steal from you in the same breath. Protect yourself. Love, Grandpa Leo. I sat on the edge of that motel bed and read it 3 times. On the 3rd time, my hands were steady. He had warned me on a folded napkin when I was 18. I just never believed my own mother was the warning. He'd known his own daughter well enough to predict, 14 years in advance, exactly what she would do. And he tried to build a wall around me with a debit card, a paper napkin, and a secret. The only thing he'd gotten wrong was thinking I'd read the note in time. But here's what mattered. The note wasn't just heartbreak. It was evidence of intent. It proved the account was meant for me alone, that my grandfather had explicitly excluded my mother, that there was nothing accidental or family about the money she'd been taking. Pop Leo, 6 years dead, had reached out and handed me the cornerstone of my case. I need to be clear about what this was. I didn't win a lottery. Nobody handed me a fortune. What that bank screen showed me was a robbery, mine in progress for years. And everything that happened next was me clawing back what was already legally mine. I never wanted more than what was mine. Didn't want my parents' retirement savings. Didn't want Cody's truck. I just wanted back what had been taken. And I wanted the people who'd taken it to stop pretending I was the helpless one. To get it, I couldn't just confront my mother in a screaming match. She'd talk her way out of that the way she talked her way through my entire childhood. I needed it in writing. Provable. Cold. Clear. Outside the reach of her excuses. So I made a plan. An ER triage plan for my own family. Statements done. A lawyer next. A formal fraud claim alongside it. And then, only then, when the truth was documented and undeniable, the conversation. Not a screaming match. A presentation. I wasn't going to fight my mother on her turf with feelings and volume, where she always won. I was going to bring her somewhere she'd never beaten me, the realm of the written down. I found an attorney named Tom Avery, an estate and elder law specialist 2 towns over, and I brought him the statements and the napkin and the dates. He listened all the way through without interrupting, which is how you know someone's actually thinking. When I finished, he set down his pen. "Miss Doyle," he said, "I want to make sure you understand how strong this is, because people in your position often think they have less than they do." He laid it out. The account was solely mine, demonstrably. My grandfather's power of attorney had terminated the instant he died, automatically by law. Every transfer my mother made from my account after that date was unauthorized. Full stop. "This isn't a misunderstanding between family members," Tom said. "This is conversion, possibly criminal. At minimum, you have strong grounds to demand the funds back, and the credit union's own fraud process may reverse some of it directly." He tapped the napkin in its plastic sleeve. "And this is unusually helpful. It establishes your grandfather's intent and explicitly excludes your mother. Juries and judges like intent. So do banks." For the first time since that porch, I felt the ground go solid under me. I asked the question I needed answered before I moved. "I don't want to destroy my family if I don't have to," I said. "I want my money back. Can we do this in a way that gives them the chance to make it right before it becomes a criminal case?" Tom nodded slowly. "We can lead with a demand letter and a repayment plan," he said. "Whether it stays civil depends entirely on how they respond." Good, I thought. I'll give them the chance. More of a chance than they gave me on a porch in the snow. The credit union doesn't sit on a fraud claim. Within days, their fraud department reached out to verify activity, and the moment my mother got a call from the bank instead of a call from me, the temperature changed. The first text was ice. "I don't know what you've started, but you need to stop it immediately." I didn't answer. The next one, a day later, had a crack in it. "Rachel, the bank called me. Whatever you think you saw, it is not what it looks like. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret." Still, I didn't answer. I'd learned finally that answering my mother was how she got her hooks in. Every conversation was a door she could walk through. The statements couldn't be argued with. My silence couldn't be twisted. So I let the paper do the talking and kept my mouth shut. And it drove her to a fury I'd never seen, because for the first time in my life, she couldn't manage me. She couldn't flatter me into smallness or shame me into silence because I wasn't on the phone to be flattered or shamed. By the end of that week, the texts were coming in clusters, swinging between threats and tears. And every single one confirmed what the screen had already told me. An innocent woman doesn't panic like that. An innocent woman says, "Check whatever you want. It's all fine. My mother said stop, and don't, and you'll regret this, and it's not what it looks like." Those are not the words of someone who's been wronged. They're the words of someone who's been caught. I screenshot every one and sent them to Tom Avery, and I went back to work in the ER, where at least the bleeding was honest. Cody found me in the hospital parking lot after a shift and told me our mother had sent him. He was angry and scared and trying to be intimidating, which has never been Cody's strong suit. "What are you doing to Mom? She's freaking out. You're trying to send her to jail over money." I leaned against my car, still in my scrubs, too tired for theater. "Cody," I said, "do you know where the money came from? For your truck? Your apartment deposit? The debts that disappeared?" He opened his mouth and closed it, and in that pause I saw that some part of him knew, or had chosen not to know, which is its own kind of knowing. "Mom said it was family money," he finally said, weaker now. "She said it was an account that was like all of ours." There it was, the phrase she'd used to launder it in her own mind and in his. "It was an account our grandfather put in my name," I said. "Only mine. He left me a note telling me to keep it away from her because she'd spend it. And she spent it on you. I watched that land. Cody isn't cruel. He's just been the favorite so long he never asked what the favoritism cost, or who was paying for it." "I didn't know," he said, "and I think it was even true." "You didn't ask," I said. "No, you didn't. That's the whole problem with being the one they protect. You never have to ask where it comes from." He stood in the cold parking lot looking younger than 28, and for the first time, I felt something other than envy toward my brother. I felt sorry for him. He had been bought with my money and never even knew the price. When threats didn't work and Cody didn't work, my mother reached for the oldest tool in her kit. Guilt. She called, and for once I picked up. Tom had advised me that a documented attempt at resolution would only help my case. So I let it record in my memory and said almost nothing. Her voice was soft now, wounded, maternal. "Rachel, sweetheart, are you really going to send your own mother to prison over money your grandfather basically meant for the whole family anyway? After everything your father and I have done for you?" I let the silence stretch. Then I said evenly, "Grandpa didn't mean it for the family, Mom. He put it in my name, and he left me a note about you specifically." A sharp little intake of breath. She hadn't known about the note. "I don't want you in prison," I went on, and that was true. "I want my money back. Every dollar you took after he died. You have a chance to make this right before it goes any further. That's more of a chance than you gave me." She switched instantly from tears to ice. "After everything, you're choosing money over your family," she said. And I almost laughed because there it was, the projection, so perfect it was almost art. "No, Mom," I said. "You did that 6 years ago. I'm just the one who finally noticed." And I hung up gently while she was still talking. And I sat with my own steady heartbeat, and I realized I wasn't afraid of her anymore. You stop being afraid of someone the day you can see the whole trick. While my mother swung between threats and tears, the boring, beautiful machinery of the law just kept turning. The credit union completed its review and determined that a portion of the transactions qualified for reversal under their fraud policy, the cleanest cases, the clearest documentation. That money started moving back into my account. Not as a gift, not as a windfall, as a correction. A wrong being made less wrong by people whose job is to make ledgers honest. Tom drafted a formal demand letter. The full accounting, the dates after my grandfather's death, the legal reality that a power of attorney dies with a principal, the note and a number. The total my mother owed me, calculated to the dollar. He sent it certified mail, the kind you have to sign for. I want you to notice how unglamorous all of this was. No shouting, no dramatic confrontations. Just statements and letters, and a fraud analyst named Dave who called me twice to confirm details. That's how you actually win against someone like my mother. Not with a better speech. She'll always have a better speech. You win by moving the fight to a place where speeches don't count. And on that ground, for the first time in my life, I was holding every card. My mother was used to winning the argument. She had no idea how to win the paperwork. My father called me the night before the family dinner my mother had called to settle things. He's a quiet man, conflict-shy to the point of cowardice, and he'd spent the whole crisis exactly where he spends every crisis, in the den with the door closed. But that night his voice was rough. "Rachel," he said. Then it came out in pieces. He'd known my mother was taking from the account. He told himself it was borrowing, that she'd pay it back, that it wasn't his place to police his wife. He'd watched her lie to me at the funeral, and he'd said nothing, because saying something would have meant a fight, and my father would rather lose a daughter than have a fight. "I should have told you years ago," he said, and he was crying now. "I let it happen. I let her put you out in the snow. I'm so ashamed." I believed him, and it hurt more than my mother's threats, because his was the cowardice of a man who loved me and still wouldn't move. "Dad," I said gently, "thank you for telling me. I mean that. Then the hard part. But I'm not stopping. The money's mine and I'm getting it back." He was quiet a long moment. "I know," he said. "I just wanted you to hear once that you were right. You were always the strong one. We used that against you. It wasn't enough, but it was the first true thing anyone in that house had said to me in years. And I held on to it." The family dinner was set for the first Sunday of the new year, and my mother stacked the room. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the same audience that had watched me get narrated down at Christmas. I understood exactly what she was doing. Surround me with relatives, frame me as the greedy, vengeful daughter dragging the family through mud, and apply enough collective pressure that I'd back down just to make the discomfort stop. She wanted me outnumbered. She wanted a jury she'd already bribed with her version of the story. The old me would have walked into that room and folded. But I wasn't bringing the old me. I was bringing a folder. Tom had prepared a clean packet, copies of the key statements, the timeline, the legal summary, and a copy of Pop Leo's note. I drove out to the house I'd been thrown out of 2 weeks before, through the same streets. I wasn't nervous, which surprised me. I'd spent the worst nights of the year in a motel and a hospital break room, and I'd come out the other side standing. There is nothing a room full of disapproving aunts can do to a woman who's already been locked out in the snow and survived it. I parked. I touched the envelope on the passenger seat the way you touch something to make sure it's real. Then I walked up those porch steps and let myself into my mother's ambush, carrying the one thing she had no answer for. The truth in writing. The living room was full, and the air was already arranged against me. My mother sat in the center of the couch, like a woman, holding court. My father beside her, staring at his hands. Cody and his fiancée off to the side. A half-circle of relatives in the good chairs, holding cups of coffee and preloaded opinions. My mother started before I'd even sat down. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice trembling with rehearsed hurt. "I didn't want to do this so publicly, but I think Rachel needs to hear from the whole family." She turned those wet eyes on me. "Rachel has decided, over some misunderstanding about Grandpa's old accounts, to accuse me, her own mother, of stealing. She's gone to lawyers, to the bank. She's trying to have me charged with a crime." A murmur went around the room. "We took her in," my mother continued, gaining steam. "We let her live here when she had nowhere to go. And this is how she repays us. I always said it. You all know I did. That girl is desperate, and she can't do anything on her own. So now she's inventing a story to take money she didn't earn." There it was. The whole strategy in one breath. The eviction rewritten as charity. The theft rewritten as my fantasy. The word desperate deployed one more time to make me small. I felt the old pull. The lifelong urge to shrink, to apologize, to make the discomfort stop by disappearing. The whole room was leaning into her story. Then I felt the envelope in my hand. And I remembered I had spent 14 years carrying my grandfather's warning without reading it. I was done being the only person at this table who didn't get to finish a sentence. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Can I show everyone something?" And I opened the envelope. I laid the pages on the coffee table one at a time, so everyone could see. "This is a bank statement," I said, calm as a vital signs report, "for an account my grandfather opened in my name when I was 18. Only my name." I set down the next page. "These are the withdrawals and transfers out of it. Dozens of them. Over years, every single one goes to an account belonging to my mother. I never authorized one of them. A few aunts leaned in despite themselves. Mom told me at Grandpa's funeral that he left nothing, that there was no account. She said that so I'd never look. I set down the timeline and put my finger on a date. This is the day Grandpa died. A power of attorney ends the moment a person dies. That's the law in every state. Every transfer after this date came out of my account with no authority at all. My lawyer calls it conversion. The bank calls it fraud, and they've already started reversing it. The room had gone very quiet. My mother's face was doing something I'd never seen it do. Cracking. And then I laid down the last page, a copy of the soft yellow napkin, and I read it aloud, steadily, for when you have to stand on your own. This is yours, Rachel. Nobody else's. Don't tell your mother, because she'll spend it, and she'll have a good reason every time. Some people love you and steal from you in the same breath. Love, Grandpa Leo. I looked up. He knew. 6 years before any of this, my own grandfather knew exactly what she would do. That was when my mother came up off the couch screaming. That money was for this family. After everything I did for you, you ungrateful, you'd humiliate me in my own home over money your grandfather would have wanted us to have. She was shaking, pointing, composure gone completely, and the whole room was staring at her now instead of me. Because a woman who's been wronged doesn't scream like that. A woman who's been caught does. I stayed in my chair. I kept my voice low. Grandpa knew you'd say that, Mom. He wrote it on a napkin when I was 18, and the room finally went silent enough to hear the truth in it. My Uncle Ray, my mother's own brother, picked up the timeline and the statement and read them slowly. He looked at the date of my grandfather's death. He looked at the transfers that came after it. He set the pages down and said into the silence, to the whole room, "She's not the one who couldn't take care of herself." It landed like a stone in still water. The word my mother had hung on me my whole life. Desperate, helpless, can't do anything on her own, drifted across the room and settled at last on the person it actually fit. Cody made a weak sound of protest. "This is insane," Mom didn't. But then his eyes caught one of the transfer lines. A date he recognized. The month of his truck. His name was nowhere on the document, but the timing told him everything. And he stopped. He just stopped. My mother looked around the room for her audience and found it gone. The aunts who'd shaken their heads at me were now looking at her, at the screaming woman standing over a coffee table full of proof. The story she told had simply evaporated in the face of paper. She turned to me, grasping, and reached one last time for the weapon that had always worked. "You can't do this," she said. "You can't do anything on your own." And I stood up, looked my mother in the eye, and gave her sentence back to her with the only correction it had ever needed. "I did all of this on my own, Mom," I said, "including catching you." My father put his face in his hands. Nobody in that room ever called me desperate again. I didn't want to stand over my mother like a victor. That's not what Pop Leo's note was for. So before I left, I told the room plainly where things stood, the way you tell a family a prognosis. The bank is reversing what it can. Tom sent my mother a letter with the rest of what she owes and a plan to pay it back. If she signs it and makes it right, I'm not asking for anyone to be arrested. I don't want my mother in prison. I want what my grandfather left me, which was always mine. But I'm not dropping the claim to keep the peace. It happened. It's written down. It doesn't get erased. I looked around the room. I'm not going to be in this family's life the way I was. I won't be the strong one you lean on while you call me the weak one. That's over. I said it without heat, which somehow made it land harder. If any of you want a real relationship with me, the door is open. But it's my door now, and it locks from my side too. Then I walked out. I was the first one to leave, which I'd never been in my life. Always the last. Always cleaning up. Always making sure everyone else was settled before I moved. I walked down those porch steps past the door that had been locked against me on Christmas, got in my car, and drove to the motel that had become more of a home than that house ever was. I didn't cry. I felt, for the first time in years, completely my own. Here's how it settled. The credit union reversed the transactions that qualified, quietly, line by line, a ledger being made honest. For the rest, my mother faced a simple choice her attorney surely explained in plainer terms than I could. Sign the repayment agreement and avoid criminal exposure, Or fight it and risk a fraud charge with a paper trail any prosecutor could win. She signed. Of course she signed. People who count on never getting caught fold fast once they are. The repayment plan isn't fast, and it isn't comfortable for her. And I've made my peace with the fact that some of it I may never fully see. But most of what was mine came home. And it came home labeled correctly. Recovered. Not given. Not borrowed. Recovered. I moved into my apartment in February, the one I'd been saving for the whole time, and I furnished it slowly with my own paychecks. There is a particular peace in a home nobody can lock you out of. Cody called me a few weeks after the dinner, not to argue, just to say he'd been thinking, and that he was sorry he never asked where things came from. He started pulling back from our mother's orbit, finding his own footing. I think some part of him is relieved to discover he might be capable of standing on his own too. My father came and helped me move a couch into the new apartment. We didn't say much. That was its own kind of apology. The only kind he has. My mother and I don't speak. She has never once said she was sorry. Not really. Not in a way that wasn't actually about herself. And I've stopped waiting for it, because a woman who could stand at her own father's funeral and lie to his granddaughter about his last gift is not going to find the bottom of her own conscience at this late hour. I made my peace with that, and the peace is lighter than the hope ever was. I keep Pop Leo's napkin in a frame on the wall of my own kitchen. The soft yellow paper and the careful slanted print. For when you have to stand on your own. I read it some mornings with my coffee. He gave me money, yes, and it mattered, but that was never the real gift. The real gift was that one person in my life saw exactly who I was and exactly who my mother was, and trusted me to figure it out before it was too late. I figured it out a little late, but I figured it out on my own. The people who keep telling you you're helpless are very often the ones counting on you never checking the balance. They locked the door and called me desperate. A scratched-up card, a bank screen, and a napkin my grandfather folded when I was 18. That's all it took. If someone in your life keeps insisting you can't do anything on your own, ask yourself what they're hoping you'll never look at. Sometimes standing on your own just means finally checking the balance. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me your story in the comments. And subscribe to Revenge Stories, where the quiet ones always get the last word.